Can you really retire in just 10 years, or is that just another online fantasy designed to sell hope instead of results? Most people hear retire in 10 years and immediately assume it requires winning the lottery, starting a wildly successful business, or taking extreme risks that could destroy their finances. But the truth is more interesting and far more realistic, because early retirement is not about shortcuts. It's about structure, behavior, and consistency over a defined time frame. So before we go any further, if you want realistic financial strategies instead of hype, subscribe for step-by-step investing education, and comment 10 years if you're curious whether a shorter path to freedom is actually possible for someone like you. Here's the first thing that needs to be said clearly. Retiring in 10 years is not easy, but it is simple. And simple does not mean effortless. It means the rules are clear and predictable if you follow them, because most people fail financially not because the math is impossible, but because their behavior is inconsistent and their expectations are unrealistic. When people imagine retirement, they think in terms of age, 65, 70, someday far away, but early retirement is not about age at all. It's about income replacement. And the moment your investments can reliably cover your living expenses, work becomes optional, whether you're 35, 45, or 55, and that is the real goal. The problem is, most people chase the idea of retiring early without ever defining what retired actually means to them, so let's clarify something important right now. Retiring does not mean never working again. It means having the freedom to choose work instead of being forced into it. And once you understand that, the 10-year timeline stops feeling unrealistic and starts feeling strategic. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. You cannot retire in 10 years by saving what's left over. The math simply does not work that way. Early retirement requires intentional investing, aggressive savings relative to income, and emotional discipline during uncomfortable periods. And the good news is that none of these require brilliance. They require consistency. So let's talk about the foundation of any 10-year plan, because without this, everything collapses under pressure. And that foundation is clarity around lifestyle, not income, because income alone does not determine how quickly you can retire. Lifestyle does. If you currently spend most of what you earn, even a high income will trap you in work indefinitely. But if you control lifestyle inflation and keep expenses reasonable while income grows, the gap between what you earn and what you spend becomes your wealth-building engine. And that gap is what fuels early retirement. This is where most people get uncomfortable, because retiring in 10 years often requires saving and investing 30 to 50% of income consistently, not for a few months, but for years. And while that sounds extreme, it becomes manageable once lifestyle choices align with long-term goals instead of short-term comfort. Now let's talk about the investing plan itself. Because without a clear structure, saving aggressively only creates a large pile of cash that inflation quietly eats away. And cash alone will never retire you early. Growth assets do. The core idea behind a 10-year investing plan is focus, not complexity. And the biggest mistake people make is trying to chase exciting opportunities instead of building a disciplined system that compounds over time, because excitement fades, but systems endure. A realistic retirement in 10 years portfolio has 3 primary roles: growth, stability, and optional income. And each role exists to protect behavior as much as returns, because investing success is primarily behavioral, not intellectual. The growth portion of the portfolio is where compounding does the heavy lifting. This is money designed to grow aggressively over time, exposed to long-term economic growth, and allowed to experience volatility without panic selling, because volatility is the cost of higher returns. Not a sign of failure. And anyone pursuing early retirement must accept that emotionally up front. The stability portion exists for one reason only: to keep you invested during rough periods. Because even the best long-term strategy fails if fear forces you to abandon it. So stability is not about maximizing returns, it's about protecting decision-making during downturns. The optional income or flexibility portion grows in importance as you approach the later years of the plan, because eventually you want assets that can support expenses without forcing you to sell aggressively during bad market conditions. But this layer comes later, not at the beginning, because growth matters more early. This structure matters because retiring in 10 years does not allow room for repeated emotional mistakes, and every panic decision sets the clock back, while calm consistency keeps it moving forward. Another crucial element most people underestimate is income growth during the 10-year period. Because early retirement is not built by cutting expenses alone, it's built by expanding the gap between earnings and spending, and that often requires increasing income through skills, career leverage, or side income. Not gambling, not overworking, but intentional improvement. Here's a mistake many people make. They focus entirely on investment returns while ignoring income potential. But doubling income often has more impact in the early years than chasing higher returns because more invested capital compounds faster than small improvements in performance. At the same time, lifestyle control must remain intact, because increasing income without controlling spending simply raises the retirement number and extends the timeline, which defeats the entire purpose of early freedom. Now let's address the biggest fear people have about a 10-year retirement plan. What if the market crashes? And the answer is simple but uncomfortable. Market crashes are expected, not avoided, and plans that depend on everything going perfectly are fantasy, while plans built around volatility are realistic. This is why long-term planning matters more than prediction, because no one knows what markets will do next year. But history consistently shows that markets reward patience and punish emotional behavior, and the investors who succeed through crashes are not fearless. They are prepared. Preparation means you do not invest money you need in the short term. You do not depend on selling assets at specific prices, and you do not base your plan on optimism alone, because optimism disappears quickly during downturns. A realistic 10-year plan assumes bad years will happen, that returns will be uneven, and that progress will sometimes feel slow, but the power of the plan is not speed, it's inevitability if behavior remains consistent. Another important mindset shift is understanding that early retirement is not built in year 10. It is built in years 1 through 7 because the final years benefit from momentum created earlier, and most people quit right before momentum becomes obvious. Those early years feel unrewarding because progress is mostly invisible. Balances grow slowly, sacrifices feel heavy, and motivation fades, but this phase is where commitment matters. Because quitting early guarantees failure, while staying consistent creates exponential results later. Let's also be honest about what retiring in 10 years does not mean. It does not mean living a luxury lifestyle without limits. It does not mean unlimited spending. And it does not mean zero effort. What it does mean is exchanging excess consumption today for optional time tomorrow. And that trade-off must be intentional. Most people already make trade-offs every day without realizing it. Longer commutes, stressful work, delayed family time, all for spending money now instead of freedom later. And once you see the trade-off clearly, choosing the long-term option becomes less painful. Here's the encouraging part. You do not need perfection to retire early. You need direction, adjustments, and consistency. Because small improvements repeated over time beat dramatic changes followed by burnout. And the people who succeed are the ones who treat investing like brushing teeth, boring, automatic, and non-negotiable. If you are starting later than you wanted, that does not automatically disqualify you. It simply means the plan requires slightly more discipline, better income control, or a more modest definition of retirement, and flexibility matters more than perfection. Let me say something important before we wrap up. Retiring in 10 years is not for everyone. Some people prefer balance today over freedom later, and that is a valid choice. But choosing it intentionally is different from drifting into lifelong work because no plan existed. And this video is about choice, not pressure. And the real question is not, can anyone retire in 10 years? But are you willing to align behavior with the goal for that long? Because the math works far more often than motivation does, and people fail not because the goal is unrealistic, but because consistency is rare. So here's the final takeaway. Early retirement is not about winning fast. It's about building a system that works whether motivation is high or low, markets are calm or chaotic, and life is predictable or messy. And when the system is strong, results eventually follow. So take action now. Comment 10 years. If you're serious about exploring what's possible with focus and discipline, subscribe for clear and realistic investing education, and share this video with someone who thinks early retirement is only for the lucky. And if you want to understand how mindset and behavior shape financial outcomes more than income ever will, watch The Millionaire Mindset: 5 Habits That Will Change Your Finances. Because strategy builds wealth, but mindset determines whether you stick with it long enough to win.